the college is proud to announce that the 1999 recipient of the Collen Award is Dr. Joshua Lederberg, biologist, geneticist, computer scientist, and scholar. Dr. Lederberg's lifelong contributions to biomedicine and science, as well as to medical informatics, make him highly deserving of the recognition embodied in the Collen Award. Joshua Lederberg was born in Montclair, New Jersey, on May 23, 1925, the son of a rabbi. His interest in a scientific career was mentioned in an essay that he wrote at the age of 7. His family moved to New York City when Lederberg was a child, and he was able to attend Stuyvesant High School, which concentrated in the sciences. Upon graduating from high school at 16, Lederberg took advantage of a local scholarship to attend Columbia University, and subsequently began medical school there. After his experiments with Edward L. Tatum that demonstrated sexual recombination in bacteria, Lederberg decided to leave medical school to pursue a PhD, which he received from Yale in 1948 at the age of 23. He then joined the genetics department at the University of Wisconsin. In 1958, when he was but 33 years old, Joshua Lederberg received a telegram of the sort that only a handful of scientists ever receive. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for his discoveries concerning genetic recombination and the organization of the genetic material of bacteria. He shared the prize with George W. Beadle and Edward L. Tatum. The work that led to Lederberg's Nobel began in 1945, when he was 20 and still a medical student. Lederberg's work, which formed the basis for his PhD dissertation, demonstrated that bacteria can in fact reproduce through sexual recombination and open up the genetics of microorganisms to the traditional methods of the field. Lederberg is known not only for his demonstration of bacterial conjugation, but also for his discovery of transduction and for coining the term plasmid. The Nobel Prize gave him a reputation among the general public and allowed him to pursue his interests at the intersection of science, policy, and society. Between 1966 and 1971, he wrote a series of over 200 articles for the Washington Post, which converted into lay terms many of the pressing scientific issues of the day. Typical articles included themes such as Russian computers are having delusions, or are they? And the premonitory Congress should examine biological warfare tests, a topic which continues to draw his interest and involvement at the national level to this day. Josh has had a long interest in formalizing the intellectual processes of scientific investigation and discovery. But on coming to Stanford in 1959 to found the Stanford Department of Genetics, his study of informatics took on new dimensions. He took classes in programming and began a series of systematic investigations of using computers in biomedicine. By the mid-1960s, Josh was working on ways to systematize the enumeration of chemical structures. This early work would find expression later on in the Dendrel project.
Yeah, it's hard to remember when I really first met Josh, but I can remember vividly the first serious conversation I ever had with him. It was 1964. It was my first meeting as a Markle Scholar. The group was in the Ahwahnee Lodge at Yosemite, and the speakers had been Jacob Bronowski, Lee Dubridge, and Josh Lederberg. And I remember seeing Josh in the sun at a coffee break, sitting alone at a table, sort of lost in thought, and I decided that he probably wouldn't mind being interrupted, and so I asked him, what was he thinking about? Seemed like not too impertinent a question, although it probably was. And he said, well, he was thinking about this, that if he had a chemical molecule in his mind, and he could see it clearly, what would be the next one that logically should be considered? Well, that struck me as kind of an amazing thing to be thinking about.
The post-Sputnik start of the U.S. space program in earnest One of Lederberg's new areas of attention was the exploration of outer space in search of life forms. He coined the term exobiology to describe this new field dealing with the search for the origins of life. He invented new ways to represent information about molecular structures, such as proteins in the computer, so they could be analyzed and compared. The 1964 printout shown here may be the first time that a protein sequence was stored in a computer for analysis.
In 1964, when I first met Josh, he was writing his first large-scale computer program in the dialect of Algol. The program was called Dendrol, for dendritic algorithm, but the reference to dendrites was metaphoric. Josh was creating a complete system for the enumeration of acyclic chemical structures. When I arrived at Stanford in January of 1965, I discussed with Josh my goal of creating models of the thinking processes of scientists, especially the processes of empirical induction with which hypotheses and theories were inferred from data. Josh suggested a task of inferring organic chemical structures from mass spectral data and enthusiastically entered into a collaboration. My sketch of Lederberg and Dendrol is necessarily brief and leaves out so much of his tangible contributions to our work in artificial intelligence and its applications. And it leaves out almost all of his intangible contributions, the texture, if you will, of the day-to-day interactions with Josh. These interactions were full of wisdom and guidance on how to run substantial interdisciplinary projects of the kind we were doing in expert systems, insights on the nature of knowledge and cognitive processes in science, and creative ideas for getting us over today's hurdle and tomorrow's hill. In truth, a flood of creative ideas. If we had had the energy and resources, we could probably have done 10 other projects with these ideas. Working with Josh on our common problems in modeling expert thought in science and biomedicine gave me the privileged opportunity to witness a great intellect at work, applying superb analytic thinking skills with the enthusiasm of a young hacker for how much fun it was to program a computer to do these things. And it was not only fun, but it was important in the history of computer science.
The Dendrol collaboration led Josh to devote a great part of his energies to computer science, including the underlying languages and tools necessary to express his ideas about molecular biology and genetics.
Walking across the lovely campus at Stanford with him following a morning in which, I don't remember the real circumstances, but a whole lot of very nice research was reported at Stanford. And I must confess, while I liked it all, I was sick and tired of hearing about Lisp and Lisp processing languages. So as we hiked off to the commissary or wherever, or faculty club, wherever we ate, I said to Josh, Josh, what would happen if some malignant deity just all of a sudden destroyed, eliminated Lisp? There isn't any more Lisp. What would you do? I mean, what would you do? And he said, oh, well, he said, I guess, Don, I'd take Fortran and write Lisp.
Lederberg insisted on participating firsthand in the development, testing, and use of the computing systems that fascinated him, no matter how cumbersome the early human-computer interfaces were.
So we got together, in particular, then he and Ed Feigenbaum, who'd been working on artificial intelligence in general, see what one can apply to chemistry, in particular structural elucidation of organic compounds, which is precisely what my area was. And they really came to me and said, look, could we just simply try and simulate in the computer how Carl Jurassic thinks? And that was really the beginning of a very fruitful collaboration for well over a dozen years, in which a lot of other people were involved, Tarmelin Fleisch, Bruce Buchanan, and so on. And we published an awful lot of papers in which we really tried to simulate a chemist's thinking in a computer intelligible language. And what was most interesting, it stimulated us to do a lot of chemical research in order to fill gaps, intuitive gaps in our own thinking, which the computer picked up, because the computer wasn't that, or the computer program wasn't that intuitive yet. That was really quite interesting, because chemists usually don't really wonder how they think. They just do it. And that really taught us an element of intellectual rigor. And it was a wonderful collaboration between people in medicine and computer science and chemistry.
As the Dendral programs evolved and made progress toward modeling the thought processes of chemists working to unravel molecular structures, Josh's interests returned to the broader possibilities of intelligent computer applications. The SUMEX AIM resource that he created in the early 1970s produced many systems that were the seeds of artificial intelligence research for years to come.
About a year after I came to Stanford, a small group of us, led by Josh Lederberg, synthesized the ideas from FACMI and Dendral in the form of a proposal to the NIH called SUMEX AIM. SUMEX AIM contained two fairly outlandish ideas at the time. The first was to develop a national community of AI and medicine application groups, and the second was to interconnect them using networking technology that was just then under development by the ARPA community in the form of the ARPANET. SUMEX AIM was the first non-DoD research resource on the ARPANET. In fact, we were node number 56 out of a total of 63 on the entire network in that current implementation. SUMEX lasted for about 19 years and was the nursery for over 20 AI and medicine projects, which were the best known in that era. Josh wrote a very important essay in 1977 that described these ideas. It was entitled Digital Communications and the Conduct of Science, the New Literacy. And I'd like to quote a brief passage from this essay. In it, he discussed how the convergence of economical digital communications with computer-aided tools would facilitate the interconnection of users separated both in time and space, and how this medium will increase the thoughtfulness of communication, return literacy in the efficient and precise use of language, and enhance scientific discourse in many ways. As I scan the email in my inbox today, I'm not sure how much progress that we've made in the literate use of language, but it is absolutely clear with the current form of the internet that digital communications have profoundly changed the way science is conducted.
Josh left Stanford in 1978 to become president of the Rockefeller University in New York. Despite the heavy burdens of administering one of the nation's leading research universities, he continued to explore the synthesis of computing and communications tools with scientific research on many fronts.
I would say that Josh created an environment in which I was taught to understand computer science as science, and not simply the construction of artifacts. So the scientific approach to computing, whereby one seeks to be sure that the results can generalize, where the experimentation is itself subjected to proof, and where there's an emphasis on methodologic development. These were key elements in the environment and the way in which I learned computer science because of the scientific influence of people like Josh at that time. I saw a brilliant mind in action, and I saw in him an interest in basically all things intellectual and an ability to innovate in very diverse fields. There was much to emulate in Josh Lederberg and his mentoring. So to this day, Josh Lederberg continues to bring a sensitivity and appreciation of computing and communications to his advisory work and to his influence at the national and the international level.
He became President Emeritus of Rockefeller in 1990 and returned to his roots as a citizen scientist. He has been particularly active in applying scientific understanding to the direction of research, to public health, and to policy. As was mentioned, he has worked hard at educating the public and government about the risks of biological terrorism and warfare, and advising on detection and countermeasures. Josh has continued his active research laboratory at Rockefeller, working on the genetics, biochemistry, and evolution of DNA, on the computer modeling of scientific reasoning, and on exobiology and the search for the origins of life. He has been honored by the National Library of Medicine in their Profiles in Science program. The NLM is collecting and organizing Josh's voluminous papers as a contribution to the history of science. Most befitting Josh's career in medical informatics, this collection is available on the NLM's website. Josh's work in informatics is a lasting legacy, and he continues to pose challenges for the field.
One principle I'd like to have my name attached to, Lederberg's principle, is that machines will become really smart only when, one, they can directly read the literature, and two, spend some time living in the real world, where the survival of the fittest is what will determine who's out there, and that as long as we have to spoon feed them datum by datum, they're going to be moving in a very cumbersome and costly way indeed.
It is with pride, admiration, and affection that we salute Joshua Lederberg as he receives the 1999 Morris F. Collen Award.